developers, I don't know if they know too much about how things get deployed, but I'll just give you like a quick intro. So I'm gonna deploy this stuff. Okay. The way that it's organized is you deploy things that are in projects. Okay. You can deploy objects one by one if you want, but what makes it easy is when you have everything in a project, you go to the deployment kind of like screens, and you choose your project and you deploy the project as a whole. That's how it's kind of meant, the workflow. Um, so um, two things I got to do in this deployment. This deployment has tables, and I made changes to tables, and we have new tables. So those need to be generated. So this table here was changed. If I had data in that table, I would need to back up that data before I did my generation because it would wipe out that data. I know that this table is just a temporary table that I'm using to temporarily store some stuff. So I know there's no data in it. So there's no potential of data loss in any of this scenario. So right now, I'm going to deploy to straight to production. I'm not going to deploy to dev, to test. I've tested it locally. I'm going to deploy straight to production. And later on, to keep all the environments in sync, we're going to deploy to all the environments so that all the environments have the latest code. Otherwise, you would have like production with some late code and your test environment wouldn't have that, right? But now because I've tested it and I'm in a rush, I want to push this straight to production. So if I deploy this, I need those specs to be in production. Okay. Right now, when I'm checking in, those specs are in, because the status of the project is 21, the specs are in the development environment. So when you deploy, it takes the specs in the environment you're deploying for. So right now, I'm gonna move those specs to 26, and you're gonna see some transferring going on here. All that transferring is taking those specs from the central objects of the development environment and moving those to the central objects of the PY environment. Right, so it's transferring. It's transferring from here to here. So now it's there. So now that it's there, I don't know if you remember what I said, that when it exists in the central objects, it's not actually the code that gets run. It's it's the latest code that will be deployed, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the runtime specifications. To get it from here to the runtime specifications takes a deploy. So I'm gonna move it from here now straight to production. So I go to 28 first. Okay, you see here 21, 26, 28 stays there. 28 just means 28 is review is complete. So like this is the way it's kind of like done, organized, is like you have a team of people. Okay, you have your developers. Your developers 21. Okay, I've tested it. The development is complete. Now I'm gonna push it to the next phase, 26. So 26, we deploy it. The users test it. Users are happy with it. The guy in charge of testing, you're gonna take it, move it to 28. Say, hey, it's complete. Everything's good. Then another guy says, show me everything that says status 28. Let's move it to production because I know it's good. Kind of like the workflow that they go through. Here we're a small company. We just really we tested here and then we kind of skip this step. We go 28, 38 right away. We don't really use this much. The 28. So right now I'm going to go 28, 38.
So 28 is like in between.
It's in between and it's not transferring specs because status of a project doesn't necessarily mean you're transferring the specifications. It's the status of a project. And you can tell JD Edwards that at certain statuses, transfer the specs to the next environment. So those statuses are 26 and 38.
Okay.
And I can show you the rules. There's rules. There's OMW rules that say at what status, it's all configurable. At what status do you want to take the specs from here and move it to here?
Okay.
And what status do you want to take it from here and move it to here? Okay. 28, nothing's happening. It's just this change of the project. No change of specs are happening. So now it's there. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, it's at status 38. We could deploy using your machine, but it's better practice, especially that. Hang on, I'm in a video here. Okay, so yeah, so it's better practice to use a deployment server. Okay, and I won't get too much into detail about the deployment server right now, but it's just like it's a special machine where you do your deployments from. Okay, and it's you do your software updates from Oracle all through this machine. So I'm gonna open that one up. So it's JD, ours is JDE 9 DEPSV. So JDE 9 deployment server. Okay, so when you log in, there's a special environment. Okay, and the environment is DEP 900 deployment. Okay, when you're working here, okay, in your environment over here, this, when you check in, you're checking in to send the storage area. Okay, there's you have a pen and a paper.
Oh,
I need to draw.
yeah. Well, 1 second.
Okay, so when your environment, okay, your what they call the path code, okay, it's and you can think of it as the path to code, okay. The path code represents the code base for your environment, and the code base is made up of two things: runtime specs, which are stored in a database, and business functions or assemblies, actual DLLs, okay. So when you deploy, right here, you have central objects, okay, and versions. And here you have C business functions. Okay, so in JD Edwards, everything that you've been working with so far has been objects of type interactive application, batch application, data structure, tables, all of those, okay? Business views, all of that gets stored in your central objects. When you create a business function, you write code in C, the C programming language. It doesn't get stored in the database as runtime specs. It gets stored as a file on the file system.
Yes.
Where that actual code gets copied to is the file system of the deployment server,
Oh, okay.
as well as the machine that I'm on right now. So when you're checking in, you're kind of checking into the deployment server. That's kind of what you're doing. And so what you do is you go onto the deployment server and you build your package and deploy it from that server. That's the kind of the workflow that you're kind of doing.
Okay.
And when you're doing the deploy, it's taking some files from the file system. It's taking some data in a central objects. It's compiling it all and it's moving it to runtime specs and it's copying those C business functions and compiling it for the server that it's going to be run on. So it's going to be it's compiled for In our case, we have two enterprise servers. We have the AS400 and we have a Windows machine. So it's compiling it once for the AS400 and putting the DLL on the AS400, and it's compiling it again for the Windows machine and putting the DLL on the Windows machine. I'm not an expert at all of this stuff. I just know the kind of the gist of it. Okay, so I just wanted to give you an overview of that. So when I go onto the deployment server, that DEP 900 is an environment which which points to the right places, because an environment is just telling is just telling the uh, client where to go to get data. That's all it's doing, the environment. So you set up environments to say, okay, if you're in development, go to this database and run my business functions on this server and run my code on this server, run my UBEs on this server. DEP 900 is a special environment which takes things locally because you're checking in here, right? So it's a map to have certain things it's taking from here and certain things is taking local. Anyway, I don't know the exact um, reasonings behind having a special environment, but it has to do with where it gets its stuff. Okay. Okay. So when we log in, there's a menu for under sysadmin. Package assembly. So there's three steps in deploying a package: assemble it, build it, deploy it. So assembling it is basically saying, what objects do you want? Put it into a package. Building it is compiling it. Deploying it is now pushing it, pushing it out to the servers that need it. So I'm going to start off with package assembly. Now there's always a full package, and then I don't know what you call the other ones. Partial packages, I guess they're called. Wow, it's not really much of a graphic here. You always have your full, which is your baseline, and then you have all of the packages that sit underneath that. Update packages, they're called. So that's an update. Okay, so a full package takes every single one of your objects in an environment and builds it and deploys it. So what we're doing right now is we're just taking a subset of objects and we're building an update package for it. So we're not updating everything, all the code. We're updating just a few objects. That's what's called an update package. And when you build the package, you tell it what's the parent package. What's the full parent package? Okay, so you'll see right now we might have two, only because Martin is cleaning up right now. He just built a new one over the weekend. So I just do an add, and I give a name to my package. The naming standard is PD for production, DV for development, and PY for PY, and then a date followed by a letter. So A would be the first package you deploy in that day. B would be the second package you deploy in that day. Okay. So today we're the 22nd. So I'm gonna say it's a production package. So I'm deploying to production. I'm not deploying this thing to dev or to PY. I'm deploying straight to production. Here I'm gonna call it new weights and dims. And this is what I was talking to you about before, the path code.
Yes.
What path code is this? The path code that we're interested in now is production, so it's PD 900 is the path code.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not, see, you have a full and an update package. If I were to do a full, I can't choose the objects that I want to, that I want. I see it's like not a, it's not highlighted. I can't choose my objects. Okay, because it's going to do everything. If I do an update, it says, okay, what's the parent package? What's the parent full package? So right now there's two. It's this one here, the latest. Martin is going to delete that eventually. Okay, so I'm going to take this one. So that's my parent package. And now now I can check my objects and say, what objects do you want to include on there? So I'm going to browse, and it's, this is where the projects come into play. MD1094. So on here, I'm going to say my project is MD1094. So I'm going to highlight all of those and just select them. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've just built a package, or I'm assembling a package with all those objects in it.
Okay.
Okay, I don't have to know, like I just put in my project name, and all the objects that are in that project
Okay.
show up, and I can select all of them. So then I can close out of here, and I can see those are the ones that got selected. Close out of here, end. So I activate the package, and I define my build. So I've just assembled it.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to build it. Next step.
Yeah.
So first you define the build. Defining the build means, where are you building for? Are you building for a local machine, to a server? Who are you building this for? Because you can build and deploy to one server if you want, and not the other server. I can build and deploy a local package, a client package if I want. So what we normally do is see the build location is client and server. So client means that when you run an update on your machine, you're going to get that specs on your machine, local specs on your machine. Like for example, right now you have the local specs of this because you're developing it,
Yeah.
but I don't have it, and Arlene doesn't have it, and Martin doesn't have it. When you build locally, okay, or sorry, when you build a client, it's a package for our machines. When you build a server, it's a package what everyone else is going to use, because everyone else, no one uses a client. That's old. Client is what we're using, the fat client. Server is the servers that the code actually runs on. So if I wanted to, I could just do this. But normally what I do is a client and a server. These I keep the default. Hang on a second, let me delete that. Come it didn't ask me to. Normally it asks me which machines. I don't know, Marte must have done something. Normally it pops this up, server selection, and it says which servers are you going to deploy for. They're both checked automatically. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm deploying to both our servers. That's our ACE400, that's our Windows, and the client as well. Okay, so I've defined my build. So us, we just build for everything. And now I submit the build. Submitting the build actually will now compile it. So it runs this. It runs two jobs. Okay. You see right now it's going through the. You're gonna see a window. See there? That's the compiler. It's building. Okay, and it's gonna build a package There's two UBEs that run,
Mm-hmm.
R9621 and R9622. R9621 builds a Windows client package. R9622 builds for all the servers. So that runs locally on the deployment server. It's running now, and we're gonna wait for that to finish. Okay, so you see now when it's finished, you're gonna look at the status of this thing. So the build completed successfully. That's the client package. So you see all the objects there. And R9622, you're gonna have a page for the client as well as a page representing each server. So we have this one here and this one here. Both are all are build completed successfully. So now I'm gonna go and do a deployment. So I do a deploy, and on this case, I'm deploying to the enterprise servers. So I'm not deploying to your machine, my machine. I'm not doing that type of deployment right now.
Yeah.
I'm deploying straight to the servers because I don't care about the client machines right now. I could if I want build a client package, but I don't normally do that. We go through. Martin built a script to do it a different way. Okay, so instead of us pushing it,
Mm-hmm.
he built a script to pull it. He knows more about the CNC type of thing. Anyway, so when I'm doing a deployment, I'm always doing enterprise server. Here, it's going to tell me which server you're deploying to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm deploying to both. And then I activate that, click on that, and click deploy. When I click that deploy, it will, um, depending on what's in your package, people could feel it.
Oh,
Meaning that it's going to be like they could be in the middle of an application and then they'll be just spinning for like, like 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So if it's a huge package, like my interface for the WMS, I wait till after hours to deploy it. In this case, it's a smaller package. We should be okay. People might feel it for a second or two, but they won't complain, right? So I'm gonna deploy that. Okay, so that's running now. That job R98 825D, which is deploying it right now. So when that finishes deploying, there's another because there's tables involved in this. There's an extra step involved. I need to generate these tables because right now what I've just done is if I deploy it without regenerating these tables, the code sees the table differently than it actually exists in the database
Mm-hmm.
because the specs are based on what I just deployed. And I changed that table and I created that table, but it doesn't actually exist in the database.
Mm-hmm.
So usually I wait until the deployment's finished. Okay, and when the deployment gets is done, I'll generate the tables. So I'm going to generate this one right away because it's a new table. So I'm going to generate that in production. And I'll generate it right now straight into PY as well. Doesn't hurt because eventually we're going to deploy this to PY. Okay, so now it's installed. It's deployed. So that code is live. No, no, straight in production. Only production.
Oh,
The, see, the package is PD. Path code is PD 900. So that code exists now in production
okay. Why two lines there?
at both servers, each server.
Oh, okay. With the window and the AS400.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna go and generate this. So the tables exist in all environments now,
Mm-hmm.
but the code just in production. So that part is working. So now what we need to do is run that SQL in production. This one here. Okay, so this one here is going to copy our data. And this one here is going to delete those records we don't need anymore. Jeez, it's taking long. Might be locked. There's a lot, but I mean, it's also not on a. Okay, there we go. Okay, so everything in production should be working now. So if I go, I don't need to film this anymore. You want me to? I'll stop it.
What?
Do you want me to continue? I can continue. Just want to validate things now. This is my file.
Did you build item distributions?
Okay, I'm just gonna change it temporarily. See here? It's telling me that does not exist in the table. This is why I do my testing. It doesn't exist in the table. I know why. Because when I did the specs are not on your machine. So when I generated the table, I generated a table from your local specs. So I need to either check it out or do a get first. Get will get the latest specs because I did the development on my machine and deployed it to the server. So when I do a get, now I should be able to deploy, generate that. Now I see it. And I have here my real values. Upload. Okay. Gonna go here. Should see 1, 2, 3, 4, and that. We're good. I'm gonna re-upload the right values. Okay, length is 10, width is 4.9, height is 3.4, and weight is 1.2. Okay, and if I look in production, I see the right values there. 10, 4.9, 3.4, and 12, plus the volume. And it's all 7 decimals, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.09. And you see the user is not what I put over here anymore. This one. This I plugged in my own values because I copied data to this table. Now I see that it's my program that actually wrote to the table and what time it wrote and who's the user that was logged in that wrote the data. So now I know we're good there. So that video, okay, was more not of a development thing, but just to give you an idea of how you get things deployed. And it's only once you deploy it that it's available to you. So the application that you built, P5541002, okay, it doesn't exist on a menu right now. So no one can get to it. But if we have the fast path, we can just plug it in, right? And I have it available to me now. This is our production environment, straight in our production environment. So whatever, don't I wouldn't like.
No,
Well, you could
I know. I want to
just
put a.
don't edit anything just because we're in production. We didn't not tested.
Oh, I don't edit.
Just don't click OK after you edit.
No, 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 no. Okay.
Yeah, with see even this, everything's there. All the code that we wrote or you wrote, it's all there. It's in our production environment because I deployed it.